In Syria, the U.S. war against ISIS is ongoing. CNN was given exclusive access to a KC-10 plane as it refueled Stryker jets. The flight coming just days after Russia suspended communications with the U.S. in protest of the missile strikes and threatened that a confrontation was imminent. CNN's Frederick Pleitgen was on board, joins us now live. Good to see you safe and sound and on the ground. What do you know?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, and there is a lot of tension right now here with the U.S. Air Force flying there over Iraq and Syria, and a lot of uncertainty as well, because there was a system in place before called deconflicting between the Russians and the Americans, and now it seems that system is no longer in place. So what they're doing right now is when they go into Syria, they fly very, very carefully. They obviously look around a lot, but at the same time, Chris, they also say that the fight against ISIS has to continue. Here's what happened to us on our mission.
Faced with new Russian threats, the U.S. military not backing down in the skies over Iraq and Syria. We're on a KC-10 tanker plane refueling the fighters pounding ISIS.
Of course, there's some tension since the Russians have announced they don't want to communicate with the U.S. anymore in the skies over Syria. That's why crews like this one take great care when they fly into Syrian airspace.
Stopping the communications significantly increases the risk of mid-air collisions over this crowded airspace where U.S. a Syrian airfield with cruise missiles last week in response to a chemical attack on a Syrian village, killing around 90 people. Washington blames the Assad regime, Russia's main ally in the civil war there, even as Syria denies being behind the attack. But America doesn't want the turmoil to affect the ongoing effort to destroy ISIS.
Despite the current tensions with Russia, the U.S. says that the fight against ISIS has to continue full steam, especially with American and allied forces on the ground and in harm's way.
A sentiment echoed by commanders leading the air war against ISIS.
We can't take our eye off the ball. It is ISIS. That's why we're here. So our national leadership decided to do something about a problem that they saw, and if we're asked to help out with something like that, we're obviously ready to do it. But right now, ISIS is the game winner.
So far, the U.S. says there have been no incidents involving Russian planes over Iraq and Syria, and they hope, despite Russia's rhetoric, that it stays that way.
Our thanks to Fred Pleitgen on that plane that was fueling the jets there, showing how fragile that situation is.
That was great reporting. Meanwhile, we have to tell you about this story that's getting so much attention. Here's a passenger being dragged off of a United Airlines flight because that flight was overbooked by the airline. What was it like to be another passenger on board? We're going to speak with two. So United Airlines is in damage control this morning after cell phone video of a passenger being dragged from his seat on an overbooked flight. This you have to see to believe. A disturbing scene unfolding in front of horrified passengers as this man is wrestled from his seat and dragged off the plane.
No, this is wrong. Oh my God, look at what you did to him.
3 Chicago airport security officers seen forcibly removing this passenger to make room for crew members on the overbooked flight. The man hitting his mouth on the armrest across the aisle.
Busted his lip.
Moments later, the distraught passenger runs back onto the plane.
I have to go home. I have to go home.
Witnesses say the man told the crew he was a doctor and was yelling that he was being profiled because he was Chinese. The incident prompting outrage on board.
The United employees come on the plane. The other passengers were just berating the employees, saying things like, "You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be embarrassed to work for this company."
And sparking a major backlash against the airline on social media. United Airlines first explaining in a statement, normally when this occurs, passengers are asked to voluntarily give up their seats for compensation and the situation is resolved. However, this was not the case on Sunday night's flight, and United was forced into an involuntary deboarding situation. United CEO Oscar Munoz later addressing the incident on social media saying, quote, "I apologize for having to reaccommodate these customers. Our team is moving with a sense of urgency to work with the authorities and conduct our own detailed review of what happened." Munoz later calling the passenger, quote, "disruptive and belligerent" in an email to employees.
Well, I've never seen this happen before. I've never, ever seen a passenger roughed up and dragged off a plane to put a flight attendant on. I mean, that's just idiocy.
The officer involved in pulling this passenger from the flight is on paid leave while officials investigate what happened.
All right, joining us now, two passengers from that flight, John Clausen and Jace Anspach. Did I come close to getting your names right?
Pretty close.
Yeah, you did fine.
All right, good. I'll take it. So as witnesses in there, we'll start with you, John. How did this start, and what were your impressions as it evolved into this ugly situation?
Well, we were boarded on the airplane, and then a United representative came on the plane and told all of us that we would not leave Chicago until they had 4 volunteers to leave the plane so that they could load their personnel, not people who were overbooked, but just their personnel. And this didn't set well with the passengers. Obviously, they were offering $800 in United Airline dollars, which isn't a whole lot because it's only for United, it's only for air travel, and they were unwilling to negotiate that.
So Jace, how did they zero in on this man as being the one who had to go?
That is the question. We don't really know. They left the plane after telling us, well, we're going to choose for you because there's no volunteers, and they came back with 4 tickets with the plane number or the seat number and the name, and they just came to up to those individuals.
Was the doctor the first one they came to, or did anybody exit before the doctor? Jace?
Nobody exited before the doctor, but there was a couple people that were asked first, and it appeared that they denied, and they also refused at that moment, so they went straight to the doctor.
So he did nothing different. He did nothing different, the doctor, in his refusal, as far as you could tell, than the people before him who said, no, I'm not leaving.
Yeah, he did nothing different.
Okay.
But it escalated, you know?
Right, so let's talk about that. So when it starts escalating and these airport officials get on the airplane, then what happens? Do you see this passenger, what leads up to him being dragged out, and then that scene? John.
You asking me or John?
John.
Well, what do we see? Well, 2 airport officials came on the airplane, tried to talk him out of his seat. At that point, it's escalated pretty far, right? There's a lot of fear now on the plane. Remember, there are women and children and students on the plane. And it's just getting more and more tense. Then the 3rd officer comes on. He's plain clothes. We don't know a lot about him. There's not real identification taking place. And then it just explodes as they yank him off of and out of his seat.
Hey, John, is that you in the orange shirt sitting in front of him?
It is, yes.
When this was going on and you're hearing that screaming behind you, what were you thinking was going on, and did you have any thoughts about doing something about it?
Well, we were returning from Athens. I had taken a group. We had been working with refugees, Iranian and Afghan refugees in Athens. We'd been flying a long time. We were ready to go home. All of a sudden, this explodes. You're asking yourself the question, what can I do? Do I get up? Do I say something? But these are police officers. They're federal police officers. You know that you're on federal property. What do you do in a situation like that?
I don't know. I mean, watching this, it's so unthinkable that all of this is unfolding in front of passengers just because the flight was overbooked, which was United's responsibility to begin with. But Jace, then the passenger who was forcibly removed, who was screaming there, he runs back on the plane. And at that point, there's video of his blood coming from his mouth. What was your impression of this passenger? Was he traumatized from this experience, or was there something else going on with him?
You know, it's hard to tell. As he runs back on that plane and he's, saying over and over again, I need to go home, I need to go home. It could have been he was dazed from hitting his face on the armrest. you know, he was acting a little bit differently since he came back on the plane. I don't even know how he got back on the plane, what was happening in the jetway, because it was until, I don't know, 7 to 10 minutes later that he ran back on the plane.
Oh my gosh! But where we see this
yeah.
blood dripping from his mouth, that's because when they were forcibly removing him, his head hit the armrest.
Yeah, that's correct. He hit his face on the armrest across the aisle.
Well, you don't know what happened when he left the plane either, right? You don't know whether or not there was a continued altercation, because when he's getting dragged out, he's not bleeding like that. Obviously, he could have bled more over time, but you don't know what happened when he left, and he didn't say anything about it when he came back, did he?
No, I mean, he wasn't
making much sense when he came back. So this happens, then what? What happens when the pilot, when the doctor makes that appeal at the end where he's holding on to the side? How did he wind up ultimately leaving the plane, and what happened to his wife?
Yeah, the speculation was that because they surrounded him, they had the people in the back of the plane leave, so they had some room, and they brought on medics and some other police officers. They surrounded the doctor in the back. Things kind of got quiet. And after about 7 minutes or so, they make room, and he starts making his way on his own up to the front of the plane. He's holding his mouth. He's holding some tissue in his mouth to stop the bleeding. And he started, you know, he's walking now a little bit more. He looks almost like intoxicated. And then at the front of the plane, he ends up collapsing. So we were suspecting that maybe they sedated him in the back to kind of calm him down and to get him to go forward, because other than that, there's no reason for him to have collapsed.
Oh my gosh. So John, I mean, having lived through all of this, who do you blame here for this ugly scene?
Well, blame is hard, but all United had to do was try and convince some passengers, and it wouldn't have taken much more convincing to get some folks to leave that plane. But after the first offer was made, the United employee left, and it escalated. She chose the people who were going to be taken off the plane. No one was talked to personally. Had she just come and talked to people, had they just tried some diplomacy, none of this had to take place.
Overbooking is not unusual, but it usually is resolved before you get on the plane and wind up taking off. That made this a little bit unusual. But Jace, what was it like after all of this? What was that flight like? Like once all this drama finished?
Well, I mean, there was some chatter going on afterwards, just about what happened, trying to process it. But after maybe 30 minutes or so, it was only a 50-minute flight. They turned off the lights. The airline, the lights went off. So everybody was tired, and things just got quiet from there on out.
You know, I want to read the statement from the United Airlines CEO about all of this, because he released two. Here's the one an email that he sent to employees, okay? He says that man, he says he was approached a few more times after that offer to leave to gain his compliance to come off the aircraft, and each time he refused and became more and more disruptive and belligerent. First of all, is that what you both saw? Did the passenger become more and more belligerent?
I don't remember multiple times. I remember her coming on the airplane, offering everyone, then coming on the airplane and telling him he had to leave. There was an altercation at that point, a verbal altercation, where he said, "You're racially profiling me. Why do I have to get off this plane? I'm a doctor. I have to go to work tomorrow. I have patients to see." And there was no negotiation that I saw or I heard or that I experienced. And then that was it. Then the police came on. And once the police were on, there was no discussion. It was, "You're getting off the plane." And they said, "We'll sort it out when we get on the tarmac," but on the runway or out of the plane. But everybody knew that as soon as he was off the plane, it was done.
And so very quickly, will either of you ever fly United Airlines again?
That's such a hard question
we were just talking about that.
To answer. How do you answer that?
Yes or no?
I'll sure
would be one option on how to answer.
Twice about it, 3 times about it. Yeah, you just if there's an alternative, I'm taking the alternative.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you, we've seen a lot of crazy things happen when it comes to airplanes, but this one, I think, is in its own category. John, Jace, thank you. Sorry you had to relive this situation, but appreciate you telling the story for us this morning.
We really appreciate you being here, guys.
Thank you.
All right, we have a lot of breaking news on the international front this morning. Let's get after it.
The Russian government, they have aligned themselves with an unreliable partner in Bashar al-Assad.
This was always going to be a controversial visit of Rex Tillerson.
This is Tillerson's chance to really go in there and lay out sort of where they want to go.
I don't want to be the president of the world. I'm the president of the United States.
If you gas a baby, if you put a barrel bomb in to innocent people, you will see a response.
Military action in response to barrel bombs would signal a dramatic escalation.
We called out Russia, we put Iran on notice, and we told Syria, this is a president that's not afraid to act.
Our battles and our policy differences need to be behind closed doors.
We cannot have this strategic confusion coming out of the White House.
This is New Day with Chris Cuomo and Allison Camerata.
What a morning. Good morning to you. Welcome to your new day. We begin with breaking news. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson right now on his way to Moscow. Tensions between the U.S. and Russia are literally reaching a boiling point. Tillerson calling out Russia for its support of Syria's brutal dictator and defending U.S. missile strikes in Syria.
So this is a big test today for America's top diplomat on the world stage. How will Russian President Putin respond to any U.S. demands? It is a critical day of diplomacy on this 82nd day of the Trump administration. Let's begin our coverage with Nick Robertson, live from the G7 summit in Italy. Nick.
Yeah, good morning, Alison. There's consensus here that there is a window of opportunity for President Putin to back away from his support of President Bashar al-Assad in Syria. What Secretary Tillerson heard today from the Italian foreign minister was that there's support from the allies who were here for the strike against Syria last week, that there's support for existing sanctions against Russia, but there wasn't consensus and support to have new sanctions put on Russia. The Italian foreign minister indicating that he thought that would box Russia in, better not to put that kind of pressure on ahead of Secretary Tillerson's visit, better to have Russia fully engaged in a political process, a political dialogue. Secretary Tillerson very clear that he feels that Putin has a choice now. Either you stay engaged with Assad and Iran and Hezbollah, or you cross the table and join the U.S. allies. He also said that right now Russia has so far abrogated on agreements and obligations.
It is also clear Russia has failed to uphold the agreements that had been entered into under multiple UN Security Council resolutions. It is unclear whether Russia failed to take this obligation seriously or Russia has been incompetent. But this distinction doesn't much matter to the dead.
But if you look at the broad, bigger picture here right now, the impression that's created among the allies here is that the United States, the Trump administration, has caught up politically with the Obama administration in wanting Assad transitioning out of power. However, what Tillerson takes with him to Moscow is the fact that this administration is willing to use some military force to back up where it wants to go diplomatically. Alison?
Okay, Nick, thank you very much for all of that reporting. Trump administration officials are sending several different messages about when and why President Trump would act again against Bashar al-Assad. CNN's Joe Johns is live at the White House with more on that. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Allison. The administration is certainly applying pressure to Russia, but other than that, the president has been pretty clear that he does not want to telegraph his intentions as to Syria. Nonetheless, in the big picture, when you look at everything, the United States has been sending a lot of mixed messages in the region.
If you gas a baby, if you put a barrel bomb in to innocent people, I think you will see a response from this president.
White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer telling reporters that another chemical attack or use of barrel bombs could result in more missile strikes.
When you watch babies and children being gassed and suffer under barrel bombs, you are instantaneously move to action.
This would mark a dramatic escalation of U.S. action, considering that Assad's regime has dropped 495 barrel bombs last month alone, according to the Syrian Network for Human Rights. Hours later, the White House walking back this apparent red line, saying Spicer meant to signal that the president is never going to rule anything out. Further muddying the waters, this interventionist comment from Secretary of State Rex Tillerson at the G7 summit in Italy.
And we rededicate ourselves to holding to account any and all who commit crimes against the innocents anywhere in the world.
Very different from Trump's America First vision.
We're not just going to become the world's policeman running around the country, running around the world.
The Trump administration's stance toward Assad also remains unclear.
I can't imagine a stable and peaceful Syria where Bashar is in power.
Spicer seemingly taking the position stated by UN Ambassador Nikki Haley on Sunday.
Regime change is something that we think is going to happen. It's going to be hard to see a government that's peaceful and stable with Assad.
Which was the opposite of statements from Secretary Tillerson.
Once we can eliminate the battle against ISIS, conclude that, and it is going quite well, then we hope to turn our attention to achieving ceasefire agreements between the regime and opposition forces.
I think they're still searching, frankly, for a policy and for a strategy.
Meantime, Syrian warplanes are back in the sky, taking off from the airbase hit by the U.S. with dozens of cruise missiles. The Pentagon claims the strikes caused 20% of Syria's operational aircraft to be destroyed. But two senior military officials tell CNN it was 20 planes, not 20%.
To clear up any questions, the president has asked the Pentagon for a full assessment of the bombing run on Friday. Military issues will continue to be on the president's plate today. He's expected to meet with his national security advisor and then dinner with some top military officials this evening. Chris.
It's very interesting, Joe Johns. We have the G7 going on in Italy, dominated by discussion about Syria and what to do. We have the Secretary of State in the air right now on his way to Moscow. Syria, obviously, on the plate. The president tweeting this morning twice in the last 10 minutes, both about North Korea and China. No mention of Syria. Why? Let's get a man who has some good perspective on this and so much more. Michael Cohen, personal attorney to President Trump and now National Deputy Chairman of the Republican National Committee's Finance Committee. It's a lot of committees.
A lot of committees.
All right. Congratulations on the new gig. We'll talk about it.
Chris.
Let's talk about the state of play going on with international affairs. The first question is, the president always says, I am my best advocate. I want to speak directly to the American people about what matters. Why so quiet on Syria?
I think right now he's evaluating what's going on. He listens to a lot of people. He formulates, like any intelligent person would do, he formulates an answer, and that's going to be the route that he's going to take. I think President Trump sent a very clear message to Syria. He is not President Obama. He will not sit back. He will not watch the atrocities that are taking place there. And as the President of the United States of America, a compassionate man, he's going to act.
How does he feel, or his take about McMaster, Haley, Tillerson, Spicer, all saying different things? It reads as mixed messaging.
Well, they should be on the same message, and they should be on President Trump's message. So maybe they do have to get together and they have to come up with a unified statement, but it doesn't matter. The president has his own agenda. The president is going to do what the president feels is right for him, for the country, for the people that he's trying to protect.
What's your gut on what that is? Because such a big part of the campaign, all the way up until last week, I mean, we have to remember that. Until last week, it was, hey, leave that world's policeman thing to a bygone era. The Syrians should deal with Assad.
But remember something. When we were watching, whether it was here on CNN or any of the other stations, the Syrian refugees that were leaving, they weren't the young. They weren't the aged. They weren't women. They were all these 19 to 25-year-old men that when they were walking to these makeshift homes in Germany that they put up for them, it looked like a military operation.
But those were selective videos that some people were putting out. The numbers tell a different story. Women and children at the top of the list. Yes, you have young men, But those refugees are the same people that the president's saying he cares so much about.
You certainly remember those visions of the men.
Yeah, the question is, why were people picking those videos?
Well, because,
was it misleading?
Or
the
maybe,
data would say yes.
It wasn't, but maybe it wasn't misleading. Maybe it was more of the reality what was going on.
No, but the numbers, Michael, say it's not the reality.
Again, I don't want to start talking about numbers. Numbers have not proven to suit me
Be
well.
your friend.
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah,
especially on this station.
But I'm saying, look, the facts are the facts, right? Women and children are the main threats there. The UNN says you have 5 million refugees who are now outside of Syria. The president had been very strong saying, I'm sending those people back. It is okay to have a change of heart in politics.
Absolutely.
To see that a position was wrong or you were motivating the wrong sympathies. But you got to own it, and you got to be clear, and you got to lead. Right now, we don't know what the president thinks about Syria.
What the president has done with Syria is he sent a message. He's strong, he's swift, he's decisive, and he is going to protect the innocent from these type of atrocities.
Every time?
That's the type of person that he is.
Because, you know, as Rex Tillerson said, you know, painful in its eloquence, barrel bomb, chemical, whatever the munition, doesn't matter to the dead. If you want to take that position, that it's a legitimate position to take, but you got to take it every time.
I'm not
they're
so
dying
sure
on a daily basis.
Right. But I'm not so sure everything has to be either all or nothing. There's degrees, and the president will pick and choose the ones that he feels are in line with his thought process.
What does that tell the people on the ground there?
You know what?
Protect your lives sometimes?
What I believe that the president will do is I believe that the president will ultimately address the country. He's not shy of the media. He's not shy of television. And I think that what he will do is he will discuss his thoughts ultimately. And I do agree with you, though. Everyone needs to get on board with the president's message, whether it's Tillerson or Spicer or whoever. They need to get on the president's message because the American people want to hear a unified message.
They elected him.
That's
in that
correct.
whole group, he's the only one who got votes.
And he is the one who will ultimately make the decision. You know, a smart man will go ahead and listen to many different people. And he will then take that information, digest it, and use it in order to make the best case for what he wants to effectuate. And that's President Trump.
Right.
He's a smart man. He's a decisive man. He's a swift-acting individual. But he's also willing to listen to people.
The process, though, is frustrating the intentions, right? Usually it's let's get in a room, let's talk, I'll make the decision, I go out, we're all on the same page. Here that's not happening, and it leads to a critical question. Tillerson's getting off that plane. He's going to Russia. He's sitting with his opposite. What's the message?
The message has to be the president's message.
Which is what?
Always. The president will probably come out and make that message clear.
But I'm saying they're meeting now, Michael. You know, and we haven't heard from the president.
Well,
I'm assuming Tillerson talks to the president in a way that he doesn't talk to the rest of us.
And he will be, or he should definitely be, on message with the president.
Is there regret for the president having been so quiet, so forgiving of Russia up until now? Because now we seem, even by their own reckoning, the Russians, forget about the U.S. or the media or the people, this is the worst since the Cold War in terms of their perception of tension. He had been very forgiving. He was very slow to want to condemn Putin on any level. Now look where we are.
Now, why is that bad? So there's a relationship that's been started between the president and President Putin. Now he can actually reach out to him and have a conversation with him that's not already predicated on tension, right? The president will get done what he needs to get done. You know, when he made the 4 promises at the inauguration, he wants to make America safe again. He wants to make America strong again. He wants to make America proud again. And ultimately, he wants to make America great again. That's why he's going to put $50+ billion back into our military. Why the economy, he's going to grow it where it's at greater than the 2% that we need. He's going to put money back into people's pockets. This is going to give America a lot of pride. Americans will be proud. We're going to be economically strong. But one thing Donald Trump is, he's a compassionate man. I've been saying that to you since the day that he made the announcement. The media has him wrong. He's a compassionate man, and he understands so much more than the media wants to give him credit for. And he will ultimately, and I've said this so many times, he will ultimately go down in history as the greatest president.
You get judged for what you do and for what you say. And As that goes on, so do the roles of history. We're seeing it play out in real time right now. The question is, why the mixed messaging? Why the frustration? One of the suggestions is chaos in the White House. Kushner versus Bannon. The president doesn't know which way to have his head settle. Do I stay with my base, stay out of interventionism, stay with what I said about Syrian refugees, or do I go with Kushner? And the presumption is that he and Ivanka, Eric Trump in an interview said, my sister probably helped convince the president to bomb Syria because she's a mother. Is his head this divided between these two people?
Okay. First of all, again, the president already knows what he wants to do instinctively. But before he acts, he does, again, what any intelligent individual does. You take in information, you absorb it, you digest it, and then you come up with your plan. Whether Ivanka's statements to him or Jared's statements or Bannon's or Priebus's or anybody's statements to him are heard, he will take the parts that he wants and he will ultimately decide what he wants to do.
Do you think he looked at Jared and Bannon and said, work it out?
Okay. If you look to see what the media is doing, everything today is based off of unnamed sources. To me, unnamed means uncredible. I don't know who's leaking the information, if there's a leak at all. It doesn't, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Is there fighting between Jared and Bannon and Priebus and this one and that one? Probably. And it's not fighting the way that the media wants to portray it. It's a difference of opinion. That's all that it is. They have different views. Do you think the president didn't know that there were different views when he asked Sean Spicer or when he asked Reince Priebus to be his chief of staff or Jared to come in as an advisor or Bannon? They all started with varying views, and these views were different months ago and years ago. That's, again, an intelligent man. You take different views from people. If everybody had the identical view, you really wouldn't need anybody.
So you're saying it's not existential, nobody's on their way out?
Nobody's on their way out, and if someone's on their way out, the only way you'll know is the president will tell you that the person is on their way out.
So let's talk about you quickly. You left the Trump Organization. You're the personal attorney for Mr. Trump, and now you've changed parties. People won't know this, but Michael Cohen was a registered Democrat.
Well, I said it on every show that I've been on with you. I think all 100 of them.
So now you've changed.
Yes.
Why?
I did. Well, I was asked by Steve Wynn, who's an amazing
He's the finance chair for the RNC.
He is the finance chair of the RNC. I've gotten the chance to spend time with him and his wife, and they're really amazing people. And together, along with guys like Lou DeGioia and also Elliot Broidy, we're going to raise about $150 million a year over the next 4 years.
Ambitious.
We're on path for it. What did I start 30 days ago? I'm already in excess of $2.5 million. And that's in between doing everything else that I'm doing. I also created a strategic alliance with Squire Patton Boggs, where my office is at, both here in D.C. and also in London. I have my dedicated offices and representing a handful of individuals and companies on the outside. But it gives me the opportunity to raise a substantial amount of money for the RNC Finance Committee. For what? For the midterm elections and ultimately the 2020 re-election.
We'll see what the numbers are in the filings. Good luck to you.
Can I ask you for a donation?
Yeah, you can ask. The answer is no.
Oh.
The last brash New Yorker who changed from Democrat to Republican is now sitting in the White House. So we'll keep an eye on you. Michael Cohen,
Really
thank you very much. Appreciate it. Allison.
Okay, Chris, up next we have a fascinating segment. It's the book that inspired the vision of White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon. We have the author of The Fourth Turning with us next. He's going to tell us why Steve Bannon thinks the U.S. is facing an imminent catastrophe.
So how old do you want to be when you retire?
I was thinking around 70.
All right. And before that?
You mean after that?
No, I'm talking before that. Do you have things you want to do before you retire?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, like what?
But I thought we were supposed to be talking about investing for retirement.
We're absolutely doing that. There's no law that says you can't make the most of today. What do you want to do?
I'd really like to run with the Bulls.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hope you're fast.
I am.
Get a portfolio that works for you now and as your needs change. Investment management services from TD Ameritrade.
Introducing Listerine Zero Alcohol.